I leaned back in my seat, feeling the hum of the airplane engines beneath me. The anticipation of our long-awaited vacation was bubbling inside me. Around me, my friends were equally excited. Sarah was fiddling with her camera, ready to capture every moment, while Mike and Jenny were laughing at something on his phone. This trip to Bali was supposed to be the perfect getaway from our hectic lives. The flight attendants were bustling down the aisles, serving drinks and snacks. I sipped on my soda, glancing out the window at the endless sky. Everything seemed perfect. I turned to Sarah, who was seated next to me. "Can you believe we're finally doing this?" I asked, grinning. "I know. It's going to be amazing." She replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Suddenly, I noticed a man a few rows ahead of us. He had a worn-out backpack on his lap and was constantly checking his watch. Something about him felt off. I brushed it off as pre-vacation jitters. Little did I know, this was the beginning of our nightmare. The flight was smooth, with nothing out of the ordinary. As we settled into the rhythm of the journey, I decided to take a walk down the aisle to stretch my legs. As I passed the man with the backpack, I couldn't help but glance at him again. This time, our eyes met, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Returning to my seat, I whispered to Sarah, "There's something strange about that guy with the backpack." "Which one?" she asked, looking over my shoulder. "The one in the brown jacket, a few rows ahead," I pointed subtly. Sarah shrugged. "You're probably just being paranoid. Relax, we're on vacation." I tried to shake off the unease and closed my eyes for a nap. But not long after, a commotion broke out. The man with the backpack stood up abruptly, causing a nearby flight attendant to stumble. In his haste, the backpack slipped and fell open, spilling its contents onto the aisle. To my horror, a bundle of wires and a digital timer were among the items scattered on the floor. Chaos erupted as soon as the other passengers realized what had spilled from the man's backpack. Screams filled the cabin, and the flight attendants tried to regain control, but the panic spread like wildfire. The man frantically gathered his belongings, but it was too late. Two burly passengers tackled him to the ground, pinning him down while others yelled for help. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, trying to calm everyone down, but the fear was palpable. "We need to do something," Mike said, his face pale. "What if there are more of them?" Sarah clutched my arm. "We can't just sit here." Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "Let's see if we can help the crew. Maybe they have a plan." We carefully made our way towards the front of the plane, trying to stay calm amid the chaos. The flight attendants were already on the phone with the cockpit, their faces tense. One of them, a woman with short blonde hair, looked at us with desperate eyes. "Can we help?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We need to secure the cabin and make sure everyone stays seated," she said. "And we need to keep that bomb away from him." The man with the backpack was restrained and moved to the back of the plane, far from the device. The flight attendants carefully handled the bomb, placing it in an empty storage compartment at the front. My hands were shaking as I helped them, the reality of our situation sinking in. We were thousands of feet in the air, with no escape and a bomb on board. The captain's voice over the intercom informed us that we were diverting to the nearest airport, but it would be another 2 hours before we could land. 2 hours felt like an eternity. We returned to our seats, the atmosphere in the cabin thick with fear. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder, and I could feel her trembling. Mike and Jenny were holding hands, their faces pale. None of us spoke, the weight of the situation pressed down on us. I kept glancing at the storage compartment where the bomb was hidden, praying that it would remain untouched. The man who had brought it was still unconscious, thanks to a well-aimed punch from one of the passengers. "We're going to be okay," I whispered, more to reassure myself than anyone else. Sarah nodded, though her eyes were full of doubt. We have to be, when the plane finally began its descent. We were rushed off the plane and into the airport, where a team of bomb squad experts took over. The man with the backpack was escorted away, and we were taken to a secure area for debriefing. As we sat in the sterile airport room, waiting for the authorities to question us, the reality of what we had just experienced began to sink in. We were alive, but the memory of those terrifying hours would haunt us forever. "I'm just glad we're safe," Mike said, breaking the silence. "Yeah," Jenny agreed, her voice shaking. "But what happens now? We give our statements and try to move on," I said, though I wasn't sure how easy that would be. The days following the incident were a blur of interviews and media coverage. We stayed in Bali, trying to salvage our vacation, but it was hard to relax. One evening, as we sat on the beach, watching the sun set over the ocean, Sarah broke the silence. "Do you think we'll ever feel normal again?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we have each other. We'll get through this together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road to recovery would be long, but we had survived something unimaginable. And as long as we had each other, I believed we could face whatever came next. As I stepped onto the plane, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the storm brewing outside or the frazzled look on the flight attendants' faces, but a sense of unease settled over me. My seat, 23A, was next to the window. The passengers around me were a mix of business travelers and families, each absorbed in their own pre-flight rituals. The man across the aisle was furiously typing on his laptop, while the couple behind me bickered over overhead bin space. I closed my eyes and tried to relax, but a strange noise caught my attention. It was a low, metallic creaking sound, almost as if the plane was groaning under some unseen pressure. We took off into the darkening sky, the plane rattling as it ascended through thick clouds. The turbulence started almost immediately, jolting us violently. The captain's voice came over the intercom, reassuring us that this was just a bit of rough air and nothing to worry about. The storm outside intensified. I gripped the armrests, my knuckles turning white. The man across the aisle muttered something under his breath, his fingers still flying over the keyboard. Then, the lights flickered. It was just a brief flicker, but it sent a ripple of unease through the passengers. The flight attendants moved through the aisles, their faces strained but professional, checking seatbelts and reassuring passengers. About an hour into the flight, the turbulence had calmed, but the tension in the cabin remained. People were trying to distract themselves with books, movies, or conversation, but the unease was palpable. A flight attendant named Maria, a cheerful woman who had reassured me during the pre-flight checks, suddenly went missing. She had been serving drinks, moving down the aisle with practiced efficiency, and then she was just gone. Passengers started murmuring, exchanging worried glances. I flagged down another flight attendant, a young man who looked equally perplexed. "Excuse me, but what happened to Maria?" He gave me a tight smile. "I'm sure she's fine, maybe just taking a break. We'll check on her." But as time passed and Maria didn't return, the murmurs turned into whispers of panic. The overhead bins rattled slightly as the plane hit another patch of turbulence, and I felt a cold knot of fear settle in my stomach. As the hours dragged on, the feeling of dread grew stronger. The man across the aisle had finally put his laptop away and was now staring out the window. Suddenly, there was a loud thud from the rear of the plane, followed by a series of rapid, panicked footsteps. A flight attendant rushed past me, her face a mask of fear. She disappeared into the galley. Another hour passed, and the storm outside seemed to grow angrier. The plane shook with each bout of turbulence, and the unease among the passengers was reaching a breaking point. A woman near the front of the plane suddenly stood up, her face pale and contorted with fear. We're all going to die. She screamed, her voice breaking. Something is on this plane. The flight attendants rushed to calm her, but her outburst had already sown panic. People started looking around, their eyes wide with fear. The man across the aisle clenched his fists, his face set in a grim expression. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, trying to reassure us, but the words felt hollow. Without warning, the plane lurched violently to one side, sending drinks and personal items flying. The oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The lights flickered and then went out completely, plunging us into darkness. Panic erupted. People screamed, and the flight attendants shouted instructions, trying to restore order. The emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in a dim, ghostly glow. I grabbed the oxygen mask, my hands shaking as I struggled to put it on. Through the chaos, I could hear a low, grinding noise, like metal on metal. It was coming from the rear of the plane, where Maria had disappeared. The sound grew louder, more insistent, and I realized it was moving closer. The captain's voice came over the intercom, strained and tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain calm and stay in your seats." But it was too late for calm. The man across the aisle leaned towards me, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Do you hear that? It's like something is inside the walls." I nodded, my mouth dry. The noise had been so unnatural, so out of place. It felt as if the plane itself was coming apart at the seams, as if something was trying to claw its way out. The flight attendants were doing their best to maintain order, but their own fear was evident. I could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices. As the plane shuddered through another bout of turbulence, the man across the aisle stood up. "We can't just sit here and do nothing," he said, his voice rising. "We need to find out what's going on." Several passengers nodded in agreement, their fear turning into a desperate need for action. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stood up as well, feeling a surge of determination. If there was something on this plane, we needed to confront it. We moved towards the rear of the plane, where the grinding noise had originated. The flight attendants tried to stop us, but we pushed past them, our fear giving us strength. We reached the galley, where Maria had last been seen. The door was ajar, and a faint light flickered from within. Inside the galley, we found Maria. She was huddled in a corner, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. Beside her, a panel in the wall had been pried open, revealing a dark, narrow space filled with wires and machinery. The grinding noise started again, louder and more insistent. Maria looked up at us, her voice trembling. "There's something in there. I don't know what it is, but it's not human." The man reached into the dark space. He pulled out a small, black device, its surface covered in blinking lights and wires. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, a strange amalgamation of technology that didn't belong on a commercial aircraft. "It's a sabotage device," he said, his voice grim. "Someone planted this to cause the plane to malfunction." We stared at the device, the implications sinking in. Someone on this plane had intended for us to crash, to die. The storm, the malfunctions, the missing flight attendant, they were all part of a twisted plan. With the truth revealed, we rushed to the cockpit, the device clutched tightly in the man's hand. The captain and co-pilot were frantically trying to stabilize the plane, their faces set in grim determination. "We found this," the man said, holding up the device. "It's a sabotage device. Someone planted it on the plane." The captain's eyes widened as he took the device. "We need to get this off the plane," he said. "It's interfering with the controls." Working together, we managed to disable the device and throw it out of an emergency hatch. The grinding noise stopped, and the plane began to stabilize. The storm outside was still raging, but the sense of impending doom had lifted, the plane touched down safely, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin. We were safe, but the experience had left its mark on us all.